It's all talk.
He's all talk. Yeah, Pelosi and her entire family. They're like Joe Pesci.
It's all talk.
Yeah, he's all talk. Pelosi and her entire family of grifters are a national disgrace. Trump's all talk. Trump's all talk, like promising to raise the minimum wage, rein in Wall Street, and take on the greedy landlords. He's all talk, yeah, like codifying Roe. You've been in and out as speaker since 2006, and you could have codified Roe. You were promising to do that.
It's all talk.
Yeah, he's all talk. Well, the midterms are 2 weeks away, and according to NBC. An NBC News poll, 71% of Americans think this country is on the wrong track. 52% of Americans disapprove of the job Joe Biden is doing. And in a generic congressional poll, the Republicans lead by 1%. That's popular vote. They lead by 1%, but we don't elect House members that way. We do it district by district, where the GOP has a structural advantage, meaning the Democrats have to be leading that generic poll by at least 5 points to signify a blue wave. This is looking really bad for the Democrats. Most Americans, if you look at the polls, care about wages. That's what they care about. They only care about wages, right? But the Democrats can't run on wages because 2 years ago, Joe Biden and Nancy Pelosi promised to raise the minimum wage, and they didn't do it. The minimum wage, which is $7 and change per hour, hasn't budged in 10 years. With inflation, that means there is no minimum wage in this country. 36 states don't go any higher than the federal minimum wage. Poll after poll in every state shows that the single biggest concern for voters right now is wages, what they're getting paid. That is what voters care about most. And the Democrats can't run on what voters care most about, wages, because they didn't keep their promise and raise the minimum wage. They can't run on jobs, because Americans have gotten too savvy, and we know jobs don't mean good pay. It means just being the working poor. So the Republicans have something that they can run on, crime, which is a dog whistle for people of color. We're going to lock up people of color. They get people to vote their bigotry, and that's a winning message for Republicans. We will keep you safe, not really, but we'll punish people of color, so vote for the Republican Party. I talk about this in my latest newsletter, which you should subscribe to, and please subscribe to this podcast. Please hit the like button and subscribe to this podcast if you're listening to it. If you're watching it on YouTube, please subscribe to this channel. Subscribe to my newsletter, where I basically said that Republicans claim they fight crime, but they are the number one cause of it. When you spend more on cops than you do social workers, you create crime. Here is Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, explaining that the Democrats actually have a serious messaging problem when it comes to crime.
8 of the top 10 states with the highest murder rates, all are Republican states. How do Democrats not know that? In fact, it's really 9 out of 10. Georgia went for Biden, but it's really a Republican state, or at least a red state. 8 out of 10. And we're losing that message?
They're losing that message because the party's run by imbeciles. There is a homeless problem in San Francisco, Nancy Pelosi's San Francisco. They have a problem with human feces on the streets, and that's not Nancy Pelosi going door to door with her 3 children asking for your vote. There is actual human feces on the streets of San Francisco. It's up 400% over the past decade in San Francisco. Human feces is up 400% over the past decade, which is about in line with the rise in cost of housing there, right? You raise rents 400%, you get a 400% increase in feces because that creates more homeless. The rich white liberals in San Francisco won't build more public housing, so they end up stepping in shit, which seems only fair since most of the people living in San Francisco stepped in shit. And by that, I mean they got lucky being born to rich parents. Most of San Francisco is trust fund babies. So San Francisco isn't building more housing. But to stop the shit problem, they built more toilets. No housing, but they're building toilets for the homeless to get the shit off the street. In fact, they just spent $1.7 million on toilets. Guess how many toilets for the homeless $1.7 million will get you in San Francisco? One toilet. That's right. For $1.7 million, you get one toilet in San Francisco. For $1.7 million, I want that toilet to wipe my ass and blow me at the same time. $1.7 million for one toilet in San Francisco. Greed, 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 greed. Nancy Pelosi and all those liberals are the reason we're turning to fascism. They offer no alternatives to fascism. The 13th Amendment outlawed slavery, but they added a little loophole. Prisoners could still work for free. That way, in the South and other parts of this country, but especially right after the 13th Amendment, Southern police officers could arrest freed slaves for loitering and put them back to work, but this time, instead of on a plantation, inside a prison. It's slavery. Because of that loophole in the 13th Amendment, the police, they don't need to solve crime. They just need to look for people of color and get them into the system, fingerprint them, get a mug shot, and eventually you lock them up so they can provide cheap to almost free labor. For example, the repairs done to the Capitol after January 6 were performed by federal prisoners working for pennies. And that's only fitting since the nation's capital was built by slaves. Who better to repair the Capitol after January 6 than the people who built the Capitol, slaves? This is slavery, and slavery is on the ballot in 2 weeks. Yes, it's been 150 years since the Civil War when we thought we freed the slaves, but we didn't. And so 5 states will vote in 2 weeks on whether or not to get rid of slavery. Voters in Alabama, Louisiana, Oregon, Tennessee, and Vermont will decide whether or not to change their state constitutions to outlaw not just slavery, but the involuntary servitude going on in our prisons as well. Incarcerated workers earn pennies per hour. That is slavery. Paying somebody pennies is slavery. If these prisoners refuse to work, many are punished. They're placed in solitary confinement, or they're denied parole, and they can no longer talk to their family or see their family. And by the way, the $7 and change per hour that is minimum wage in this country, that's not slavery, but it's sure close. As Professor Harvey J. Kaye said on my show Thursday night, a minimum wage that low creates a cycle of debt that turns tens of millions into indentured servants. Max Parthas, State Operations Director for the Abolish Slavery National Network, told the Associated Press over the weekend, quote, "We've never seen a single day in the United States where slavery was not legal." He added, "We want to see what that looks like, and I think that's worth it." So the Democrats, they should win on crime, but they can't because they have a little problem. They have a little problem. Joe Biden is a pathological liar. He ran, as I said, promising to raise the minimum wage. He didn't. So voters don't believe him when he says he's going to put an end to the worst crime of all, mass shootings. Here is Joe Biden on the campaign trail lying.
I'm coming back and I'm going to eliminate assault weapons again. I promise. I did it once.
When you have a candidate, when you have a president who's a pathological liar, voters don't trust him. It sounds good. It gets an applause line, so he keeps saying it. He's going to eliminate assault weapons, but he's lying. He's not going to eliminate assault weapons. He could have done it already. He could have signed an executive order yesterday. I've said this countless times. He could sign an executive order right now that says the Pentagon will not purchase assault weapons from any company that sells assault weapons to consumers. He could do that today, but he won't. He's not getting rid of assault weapons. He's a liar. He's a good liar, but he's a liar. He lies. We have a problem. We have a president who can't stop lying. Here he is lying to young voters this week.
I told you a true story. When I left the vice presidency after Bo died, I wasn't going to get involved in politics anymore. So I became a full professor at the University of Pennsylvania. But before that occurred, 3 universities came to me and said they wanted to interview me to consider my being the president of the university.
That is a lie. That is a lie. Biden is lying. He lies. You know who doesn't lie? Bernie. Bernie Sanders doesn't lie. And he thinks the Democrats he also thinks the Democrats have a messaging problem. In several interviews over the past 2 weeks, Bernie says the court overturning Roe v. Wade is not going to put the Democrats over the finish line. He said abortion is important, but the Democrats have to run on the economy. And like I said, they can't. They can't, because all Americans care about is wages. I have looked at the internals, the polling internals, in practically every state. Wages, more than Ukraine, more than crime, more than abortion. Voters care about wages. How much am I going to get paid? See? And Biden didn't raise the minimum wage. He promised to. And it turns out, Joe, wages above everything else is the only thing voters care about. Biden, and the Democratic leadership, except Bernie, sound like every boss I've ever worked for. Yes, I get it. You want to be paid more, but this job is about so much more. No, boss, it's about wages. You promised me a raise, and now you're telling me I have to worry about the soul of our nation, about the future of our democracy, that the Republicans, that MAGA is an existential threat to the soul of our country. You promised me a raise. I can't afford to live. This is what your boss does, right? Joe Biden is your boss. He makes it about everything other than keeping a promise, and that is to pay you more. The Democrats are run by morons. The Democrats are going to lose because they're run by lying morons. They never figured out that the one thing that they care about more than anything else in the world, money, is the same exact thing that voters care about. Money, wages. You want to win? You buy votes. You give voters a raise. You raise the minimum wage. That's how we get your vote, by giving you money. You get the American people's vote by giving them money. Where is the raise in the minimum wage? 10 years without raising it. It's been eliminated, is what's happened. $7 and change per hour in this economy with this inflation is no minimum wage at all. So congratulations, Joe Biden. You helped the Republicans succeed in getting rid of the minimum wage without having to get rid of it. We no longer have a minimum wage. Under Joe Biden's leadership, we lost abortion and the minimum wage. They still haven't codified Roe, but it's Manchin, right? It's Manchin. Keep saying it's Manchin. The American voters will be very understanding when they're told, we can't do anything because of Joe Manchin. That's how you win elections. Blame it on someone in my own party. They lost the minimum wage and abortion. Meanwhile, there are reports that the economy isn't in as bad a shape as we are led to believe. You know, despite warnings that we're entering a recession, Bloomberg is reporting that the economy is still growing, but most Americans, for some reason, don't see it. Why is that? Because the economy is growing. The economy is growing, but all the money is going to the richest 1%. Voters, like I said, are concerned about wages. They don't give a shit if the economy expands or contracts. They care about wages. That's it, wages. You didn't give them a minimum wage. They're not voting for you. They care about inflation, too. And here is Nancy Pelosi with a new talking point that she took from me. This is what I said last Monday, and Nancy Pelosi said it yesterday, but she only got it half right.
And the fact is that when I hear people talk about inflation, as I heard him there, we have to change that subject. Inflation is a global phenomenon. Yes. The EU, the European Union, the UK, the British have a higher inflation rate than we do here. It's not, the fight is not about inflation. It's about the cost of living.
Right. It's almost as though she watched my show on Monday and just took one line and didn't learn anything. I said last week, Nancy, if you'd listened to the whole thing, I said that cost of living and inflation are synonymous, and you can bring down inflation with a rent freeze. 1/3 of inflation, Nancy, is rent. You freeze rent, you bring down inflation. But the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, owns $100 million in real estate. So inflation is great for her. Go back and watch Monday's show, Nancy. I explained that inflation is caused by three things: rent, war, and climate catastrophe. The Federal Reserve cannot raise interest rates out of this type of inflation. You can't cure this inflation by raising interest rates. As long as there's a shortage of housing in San Francisco, okay, there will be shit on the street and inflation. Rent will be high. If you're spending $1.7 million for a toilet, one toilet, and not for housing, there's going to be inflation. I don't care how high interest rates go, you idiot. There will be inflation and war. As long as there's war in Ukraine, there will be inflation, right? Food prices go up, energy prices go up. You can raise interest rates to 100%. You don't stop that war in Ukraine or do a rent freeze. Inflation is just going to keep on going up. And of course, climate catastrophe. You want to talk about supply chain issues, you moron? What do you think is the biggest contributor to supply chain issues? Climate catastrophe, which causes supply chain issues on a scale so unimaginable for the people in Washington. They rather perpetuate the lie that inflation is all about lowering and raising interest rates. Go back and watch my entire opening to Monday's show, you murderous cretin. And thus, we're looking at a massive red wave. It didn't have to be this way. The American people hate Nancy Pelosi. She consistently polls as the least favorite member of Congress. Her unfavorability rating averages about 57% right now. She has a higher unfavorable rating than Kamala Harris, Biden, Schumer, and Trump. She's less popular than Donald Trump. The American people don't like Nancy Pelosi because she's not just out of touch, she's full of shit. Whether you like it or not, when it comes to the House of Representatives, the midterms are a referendum on Nancy Pelosi. Kevin McCarthy has an unfavorable rating that's 14 points lower than Pelosi's. In other words, Kevin McCarthy is 14 points more popular than Nancy Pelosi. Granted, the American people have no idea who Kevin McCarthy is. I promise you, once you get to meet this piece of shit, he'll be down getting the same numbers as Nancy Pelosi. Why does Nancy Pelosi cling to power if she's despised so much? What is her political capital? It's capital. Money. It's capital, and that's it. She can raise money. She can't go out and campaign with any candidates. People hate her. She has money. She's from San Francisco, the banking capital of the West, so she can spread money around. That's her political capital. Kevin McCarthy, meanwhile, says when he's speaker, he's going to demand they balance the budget, will enforce the debt ceiling, and that means Medicare and Social Security will be on the chopping block. Here is Congresswoman Nancy Mace, a Republican from South Carolina.
Kevin McCarthy suggested that if your party wins back the House, he would refuse to lift the debt limit unless Democrats in the White House agree to spending cuts. Are you on board with that plan? Are you willing to risk the U.S. defaulting on its debt as leverage to impose these spending cuts?
I support that.
Yes, she supports that. And that is what the red wave is going to do. That is they're going to chop Social Security and Medicare. That's what the Republicans are going to do because the Democratic leadership is morally and spiritually bankrupt.